Who's friends with all the night dreamers, talking to you at night. Gary on the radio, but maybe he's not in sight. Bigfoot's on his tail, flying UFOs, that's right. Gary's talk show radio, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday nights. If you need a friend to talk to, he will always be there. The Night Dreamers talk show will fix your despair. If you want to talk conspiracies, Night Dreamers is for you. Top secret case, alien space, it's Gary with the news. Tune in on the radio, don't let Big Brother know. They're listening to everything, even Gary's late night show. If you need a friend to talk to, he will always be there. The Night Show Dreamers talk show will fix your despair, because Gary's talking to you at night.
Diving into the headlines of the mysterious and unexplained, this is The Unseen News with Guy Ticker, where the extraordinary is just the beginning. More UFOs. Several pilots reported seeing 3 or 4 UFOs in the sky over western Oregon, flying at different altitudes just a few weeks ago. This according to a report from KPTV. The pilots reported seeing strange red circular lights zipping around at night. And as the outlet also reported, a United Airlines pilot contacted the control tower to talk about moving lights seen where? That's right, over western Oregon. And that wraps up tonight's top news stories. This is Guy Ticker on the Night Dreams Talk Radio Network. Get ready for the ultimate ride into the unknown with Gary Anderson's Night Dreams Talk Radio, hosted by the legendary voice of alternative talk radio, Gary Anderson himself. This is where the best guests and the biggest mysteries come alive. From UAPs and Bigfoot to earth-shaking changes and mind-bending time travel, we've got it all. Brace yourself, because when night falls, Night Dreams Talk Radio takes you to the edge and beyond.
Well, it's already the 2nd of January, and boy, time is going by so fast. I hope everybody had a New Year's. A lot of things are going on. You know, credit card debt is going to maybe collapse this year. Right now, people are $49 billion in debt with credit cards all across this country. That is really scary. Well, tonight we're going to be talking about, UFOs, orbs, all these drones and what is going on with disclosure and what are the aliens or UFOs doing monitoring, our nuclear weapons and all that. Our guest tonight is Steve Bassett. How are you doing tonight, my friend?
It's been the last couple of weeks.
Okay, we're breaking up there.
Okay, hang on a second. Let me check my mic.
Okay.
Make sure I got the right one. Just take a second here. I'm going to do this because I had to reboot. Okay. Let's see. I'm looking. I can't seem to find my. How does this sound? Does this sound better?
Yeah, it does. I think it's the atmospheric plane of the ionic sphere getting a negative discharge. I don't know what it is, but I tell you, I've been off pretty much for the past month because of health issues. And I tell you, when I went here to, I tested everything out today, went to go on the air, and everything just crashed. Typical. Anyway, how you been, my friend?
Again, it's been, the last year was pretty intense. And the last, obviously, 30, 40 days have been extremely intense. I definitely aged. I can tell. I look in the mirror, I go, yeah, you put on a couple of years.
Well,
By the way, I have a confession to make.
Uh-oh, go ahead.
5,000 of that $48 billion is in fact mine.
Well, about 20,000 of it is mine. How's that? I beat you. But that's scary. $49 billion in debt.
But just think of the interest the bank is collecting.
Yeah, but this is past due that people owe money on that haven't been making payments. That's the scary part.
They usually settle at 50 cents on the dollar after a reasonable length of time. What can I say? I don't know that from personal experience, of course. It's just I read a lot. It's okay.
So what do you think has been going on with all these drones? Because, again, depending on who you listen to, some people think it's, an alien invasion. Other people think it's this, that. I think it's Walmart, Amazon, and people are looking up in the sky and actually seeing what's going on. But what's your take on it?
Well, since I do pay very close attention to it, and in fact, I'll show you something in a minute if I can do a screen share, and I think I can. Over the 77 years since Roswell, we've had a number of what are called UFO flaps. I forget where the term flap came from. I should look it up. I'm sure there's a logical reason why it's called a flap. And this meant a lot of sightings happening over a period of time. And so many that it got the attention of maybe even the media a little bit, certainly of MUFON, what have you. And so they had a flap. All right. And that's been going on. Most famous flap was not a particularly long one. It lasted about 8-9 days, but it occurred in 1952 in July, almost exactly 5 years after Roswell. A number of craft repeatedly flew over Washington, D.C. It was clear that they were over Washington, D.C. They were seen directly over the Capitol. There probably were pictures taken. Of course, this was a long time ago. People didn't have the cameras with them all the time. But those pictures are gone. We can't find them. I think there may be in the archives of one of the newspapers. It's possible to dig them up. I don't know how much of an effort has been made. But renditions of that event, most famous one is of the Capitol, I think 5 lights above it. One rendition, so good it looks like a photograph, have been out there forever. This was a very significant event. It scared the hell out of the government. They realized that the ETs were just not going to, occasionally show up, that Roswell was only the beginning. So they got very upset. They gave an interview to General Sanford. He tried to console us a little bit, though it was interesting what he said. Keogh then came out and said, "Hey, they're extraterrestrial." And then, as a result of that, they put together the Robertson panel that essentially formalized what would be the truth embargo, right? Meaning that we're not going to tell the people about this because that's the threat, not the actual phenomena, which they actually said was not a threat. So this is a flap. What's going on in the last 2 years is the biggest UFO flap of all time. Nothing comes close. It starts a little over 2 years ago, though it's hard to pin it down, obviously. But probably the first indication of what we're seeing now that became public was a film that came out showing a whole bunch of essentially drones, looking like drones, flying around one of our warships. I think it was the destroyer. And undoubtedly this film was taken by one of the crew. They could take phones on the ship. And maybe a lot of crew filmed it, and a lot of those were confiscated, but somebody slipped one out. So this film came out, and it was very interesting. In fact, it was so interesting that it ended up being shown at the very first hearing held since 1968, 50-some years after the last one we held a hearing in the House. I think it was the House subcommittee, I think, of the Intelligence, but I'm not sure. I should check that. But it's the one where Mr. Moultrie, Mr. Bray testified or came to give a report on what was going on with the UAP task force. And so they asked him a number of questions. It didn't get particularly profound, but it was interesting if you listen and watch it carefully. But in the middle of that interview, for whatever reason, and I don't know why they did this, they showed that film of this swarm of somethings around this destroyer. And Bray, I think it was Bray, tried to explain it as like, well, no, it looks like a triangle thingy, but it's, the angle of the camera light or whatever the hell. And everybody laughed. And that was that. But I think that was a number of drones around that destroyer. And one of the reasons they showed it, it was getting a lot of traction on the internet, and they need to sort of cool it down a little bit. But unfortunately, again, we've gotten way too smart and know way too much for these silly games to work anymore. And so immediately, the immediate question that came to mind instantly is that there is no way in hell that any U.S. warship is going to allow drones to fly around it without blowing them out of the sky with some really fine weapons. They've got some good stuff, okay? A couple thousand rounds a minute. And they didn't do anything. Right? So that doesn't comport. You say, well, no, they're just harmless drones in the middle of the Pacific. You realize how many casualties, how many tanks and other armored vehicles, how many people have died in the Ukraine-Russia war from drones, militarized drones that can literally blow up tanks and could even sink a ship. And so we did nothing, just kind of let them fly around. Why would we do that? So that's 2 years ago. And then things were happening, but it wasn't clear. Well, I wasn't collating it. It wasn't getting a lot of press, but it kept escalating. And then an X number of months ago, it went Broadway. And so all of a sudden, we're getting things in the sky amongst multiple locations, almost always near or above military facilities or sensitive facilities, and in other countries, UK and others, though it seemed like the highest concentration was here. And this went on and on and on. So that's what I mean about a UFO flop. These were UAPs, right? They were mostly in the form of light balls, or what we call plasma balls. Doesn't mean that's what they were, it just means that that's what they look like, okay? And anybody with a reasonable understanding of the modern world know that a plasma ball is not what airplane lights look like. And so these things were turning up in multiple groups, moving in multiple directions, whatever. This is going on, and suddenly it just explodes. Okay. Now, by the time it really explodes, I think what happened was this, is that the government, realizing this was not just any flap, this wasn't going away. It was huge. It was multi-country, and they couldn't just ignore it. They were going to have to deal with this. They knew it. They knew it was an impossible situation, because what are they going to say? There's all these balls of light and plasma balls and other things, various sizes, some large, some small. I'm just talking about the light balls. They're all over the place. And what is it? And the answer is we don't know. We have no idea. It's one thing to say we don't know about certain UAP things that reports came in. We don't know what it is. We've looked at 20 or 30. It's another thing to say that phenomena over multiple cities from coast to coast in other countries, it can't be explained, that they're having to reroute planes around. We don't know. Yeah, I say that. That's not good. And so they did the only thing they could do. And that is they did a couple of things, but what they did was they started sending up military drones. We have lots of them. We have drone types that nobody has ever seen. Drone technology is advancing in the national security sector at warp speed. In fact, one could make a case that every war from now on will eventually be nothing but drone wars. Like a Star Wars episode. No people die at all, just drones fighting each other until you run out. We sent those up. Clearly, you would be able to see those as drones. They have certain lights on them. They have certain dimensions. They have a certain look. Some have propellers. And people are seeing drones. They're seeing our drones. And so they could then say, well, it appears what's up there is drones. Drone swarms. Drones and drones and drones. Okay, that was the best they could do. They had no other choice. And to give you an idea how, but that wasn't the end of it. Their situation was still very bad. Their only hope was that these plasma balls and light balls and other stuff would just go away suddenly, just like they did in '52. They were over D.C. and then they left. They didn't come back. But they didn't. They kept staying up there. And so the questions begin to come to the DOD, to the White House spokesperson, to members of Congress, to the press, and so forth and so forth and so forth. Lots of questions. Okay, what are they? All right. Are they ours? Are they in other countries? Okay. And so the fundamental answer that the government came up with, our government came up with, the other governments are pretty much remaining quiet, is that they're drones. Okay, there you go. They're drones. And some of them clearly are. And so, okay, so far so good. People say, well, are they our drones? No. They're not our drones, which of course is a lie. Why did they have to say that? If they say they're our drones, then the next question is, what in the hell are you doing flying drones over military facilities and some neighborhoods in multiple states across the country and in other countries? What exactly is the reason for that? And they don't have an answer for that. No answer they could give would make any sense. And so they're just drones. Okay, so they're not ours. Yes. Next question. Well, are they another nation, like an adversarial nation or any nation? No, they're not another nation. Why did they have to say that? Because if they said, yeah, and that gets them off the hook. Yeah, they're other nation, right? They're flying them. It's not us, those rascal nations. And then the next question is, you're saying that you were allowing another nation, right, which maybe you don't even know which one, fly drones over our military facilities, drones that could be militarized and go down and blow things up, and you're doing nothing. Is that what you're saying? Well, obviously they can't do that. And so they say they're not from another nation. And then the question is, well, then what are they? And the final answer is, we don't know. That is the government's position on this, and has been for months and months. Then they made a little side maneuver. Somebody brought up the idea of Chinese drones. They also brought up the idea of Iranian drones being flown in off a drone mothership. Okay, which does mean they have to have one on both coasts, because they're happening on the East Coast, the West Coast, and the UK. There must be a lot of Iranian drone ships out there, which of course is utterly ridiculous. But that came up in the internet as the internet is trying to solve this, because that's what the internet is. It's a giant brain, and when posed with a problem, that entire brain seizes on it and comes up with answers, sometimes the right answers. Okay, and so they came up with the Chinese drone thing. Well, look. It's ridiculous. The idea that China is flying hundreds and hundreds, if not tens of hundreds of drones over some of our military facilities and other sensitive areas, and we're not doing anything because we don't want to offend China? That's absurd.
Well, we didn't we did. We shot a couple balloons down. I mean,
yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. They were balloons, all three of them. And they shot them down, right? And these are far more of a threat to us than those silly balloons, right? That friggin' thing just lost some. It got a hole in it, came down too low, and Xi Jinping tried to lie and say it was a weather balloon, which really pissed off Biden, so they shot it down. I think they wanted to just let it go, just kind of fly over. Well, which they did, right? It did fly over. They said they were going to shoot it down. So when it finally flew into the Atlantic, they shot it down. The idea was not to do anything over land. Whatever. It was a fiasco, which is what the UFO truth embargo, UAP truth embargo does. It's a fiasco. It makes fools out of everybody, particularly the United States government. All right. And so what's happened recently now, okay, is there, and I've got the articles, I can show them to you. They're trying to introduce some legislation to deal with the Chinese drones. And I'm going, what? You don't mean the Chinese drones that you say are flying over our facilities? No, it's the fact that many, if not a significant portion or minority of the drones that people are buying, the hobbyist drones, they're being bought from China because the price is great. So there's a lot of Chinese drones here purchased over Amazon, right, by Americans that go and fly them around with little propellers and stuff. And so now they're going to deal with those Chinese drones. Meanwhile, the things that are up there, what can you do? I mean, this is turning into a farce, a truly magnificent cosmic farce, right? It's profound. And so this flap is still going on. And that is what is happening. And it's a major problem. And it's probably going to end the truth embargo for a number of reasons. Not simply because the ETs are apparently quite determined to end this thing. They've had enough. They've lost their patience. It's time to get this done. We keep putting it off and playing games. Meanwhile, we're building nuclear weapons and threatening each other with destruction. And so I think they've decided to intervene. Okay, right? That makes a certain amount of sense. And that's the proposal. That's how I'm viewing it right now. We still obviously haven't resolved this yet. And the question is, what is the government going to do? The government really only has one option: disclosure. However it's going to happen, and I can talk about that, I have a pretty good idea where things are going, is that disclosure solves the problem. In other words, there is non-human technological non-humans here from somewhere. Okay?
Well, something is going on.
We have not told you before, but we're telling you now. And now that they've said that, they can say, and those things you've been seeing up there, the ones that weren't our drones, that was that non-human tech. Whether piloted or otherwise, and now you know, okay? and therefore their problem is solved, and we move into the post-disclosure world. That's kind of the status of this.
You know what does scare me, though? All this time it was being reported by the news media, the newspapers, what view they are, and on TikTok and all this media, people were just going crazy over this back a couple weeks ago, insanely. And it took weeks and weeks before the government kind of halfway spoke out about it, which really alarmed me.
Well, that's because they were trying to figure out what to do. Right? I mean, the ETs had playing their hand, and we had to respond. They played their cards, and I'm sure over at the Pentagon, they were staying up late at night going, what are we going to do? We can't stop it. We can't shoot them down. It's pointless. Can't do that. We can't say anything, and yet, of course, it's all over the internet. What are we going to do? And that's how they came up with, we got to send up drones, kind of dilute the situation. Then we can say they're drones, and it's a drone swarm, and that kind of deflects it and buys us some time. To do what, I don't know, but it buys them some time. So that's why you had a delay. Now, let me point out something else. If the ETs are committing an intervention here, and for those of you that are not familiar with intervention, I think most of you are. It's pretty common in America. Usually you have the intervention because someone's life is fell apart, and they're in deep trouble, almost certainly because they're addicted to something. All right, invariably they're addicted to something. That's usually what takes them all the way down that triggers the intervention. And so the ETs are intervening, which raises the question, what are humans addicted to that requires this? We were addicted to war. That's what we're addicted to. So we have this intervention. Okay, now, this is what makes it even worse for the government. In my lifetime, but really, in almost the exact span of time that I have been involved in this issue as my life's work, from 1996 onward, January of 1996 onward, we have seen the most extraordinary transition for media and journalism in all of history. It hasn't been properly appreciated by the average person. And it starts off with essentially the internet. The basic internet, which allowed people ultimately to do emails in public. It was already happening in the private, within government facilities, in essentially localized entities, but eventually everybody could do that. So we get into the email era, early internet, and that's pretty cool. People are throwing emails around like crazy. Millions of them are flying. Yeah, the dial-up is kind of slow, but whatever. All right, emails, big deal. And then the flame wars started, where people are insulting each other in email back and forth. Those were really funny. I enjoyed those. And that went on for a number of years. But the internet kept expanding and growing. And so more and more people are getting on and on and on and on and on until it's in the hundreds of millions, probably a billion or more. And then social media drops in. Now, meanwhile, websites are being created. So that's another form of communication. Not emails, but you have a website. People go see it, look at it. Maybe they contact you. You go look at their website. Eventually they could be translated. Very big deal. Website's a big deal. But then it got bigger. Social media hits hard. Facebook, 2003. Boom. Right? Twitter, 2006. Quadruple boom. And then other social media platforms are forming until quickly billions of people are communicating with each other through these platforms, through these social media and they have lists of supporters and what have you. I have to triage it, right? This is huge. This expands the connectivity and the information flow even greater. But it's not the ultimate. In a sense, there's still more to come, but it's like, okay, so you tweet something and somebody reads the tweet and they put something tweet up there and whatever, and you got this kind of information flow going on. In Facebook, it's a little more narrow. You can only have 5,000 friends, but you post and somebody else sees the post and they post or whatever. That's not bad. It's growing. It's growing. And then the big one hits. The one that is not fully appreciated yet, but I think we're starting to get the picture. And that is the era of citizen broadcasting. Because of the incredible drop in price of high-tech equipment capable of doing audio and filming, as well as, of course, increased bandwidths, huge bandwidths from the fiber optics and everything else. So more bandwidth, cheap equipment, and the ability to then broadcast online. to anybody.
Yeah,
to the
but
world.
here's the thing, Steve. You have now more podcasts than most people could really even comprehend out there doing podcasts. And the thing is, if you listen to some of these podcasts, I mean, there's so much misinformation going out there. That is the scary part about all these people, with the cheap microphones, cheap ways to get on the internet and do a show.
I'm not concerned, Gary. Believe me, I'm not concerned. That's not the problem. It's not a problem. So I don't know how many million podcasts there are now. I've heard numbers like 7 million, but nevertheless, podcasting. All right. Now, what does that mean? It means that anybody, because there's no law against it. Well, it can be limited in some countries. You can be 10 years old. You got a decent camera. You got a decent microphone. You got a decent internet. You set up something and off you go. And then, of course, you've got these media platforms for them that start to develop. Right. And so you've got all of those. We got YouTube, all of this. All of this is just expanding. It's exploding. And where does it lead? It leads to this. And by the way, I should also mention that social media is still developing while the podcast revolution is coming on board. And so the social media in its own way starts to get extremely powerful beyond anything we could imagine in 2006. And what do I mean by that? Because when you look at it, when you look at TikTok and Instagram and Twitter, for sure, less so Facebook or LinkedIn, but you look at Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, it is so vast, so interconnected, that people are able to do whatever they do and attract followers, not ones and twos and thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions, hundreds of millions. And so in a short amount of time, from 2003 to 2024, which is essentially 21 years, we went from a situation where people had some Facebook friends, okay, and posted on each other's Facebook, and they could build up to almost 5,000, to a point where we had what is called, and this word absolutely should have been word of the year, and maybe has been. I need to go check the words of the year, right? I know the recent one didn't impress me, but whatever. And if it wasn't a word of the year, it's ridiculous. It should have been. We got the age of the influencer. What is an influencer? It is a person with some talent or popularity, good personality, who doesn't have 1 million followers, or 5, or 10, or 20. They have 50, 80, 100, 120, 200 million, 300 million followers. And they are influencers. They can make any amount of money they want simply by taking advantage of those 3 million influencers. They can elect people to an office by endorsing them. All right? They have enormous power, and they sometimes use it. So they're going to be rich. They have enormous power. They're influencers. And basically, but all they are is simply putting videos out on a social media platform. And certainly they market it and what have you. They can get on multiple platforms, but basically even on a single platform like TikTok. And these people have enormous power. Well, then it gets better.
They do. I happen to know one that has like 3 million followers.
Sure.
And I was talking to him back this morning, and I said, I looked at your what you put up on YouTube, and I disagree with it. He goes, hey, I'll be honest with you, Gary. I know it was fake, but it makes me a lot of money, and it brings a lot of views, and that's the scary part right there.
Again, you're looking at a small portion of the downside. You got to look at the upside, which is huge. All right, and so on just the static, what we'll call the static social media platforms, where you can post. Right, and your posts accumulate, and everybody sees your posts, and they get passed around. That has become huge, but it is now merged with the podcast revolution, and so now you have people doing podcasts with 100 million followers, doing a podcast that gets 50 million views, and they're being churned out on a regular basis. And now you have influencer podcasters. And this isn't a post. These are videos, lengthy videos and interviews and information that's then archived and never goes away. They're piling up by the hundreds of millions, right? A massive information base. And it's searchable. And the most important thing about this, Gary, is this. It is vast, it is huge, and you still have choice. And so people can go and say, that looks good, I'll go there. That looks good, that doesn't look good, I won't go there. People can still choose and select and triage. And so consequently, the cream rises to the top, generally. By and large, those influencers that have what it takes, right, and get the right interviews and get the right subjects, get huge following, massive views. Some people get following and massive views by putting up nonsense and silliness, right? I don't have a problem with that. Stand-up comedians just do comedy; they get huge followings, okay? but the real power is in the truth that's getting moved around by citizen journalism during this age of the podcast. The podcast revolution is the biggest transition in media in the history of the human race. I know a lot of people would say, no, it was the printing press. Yeah, really, yeah. They could print books back then, and maybe 10 or 15 monks would read them, right? And then they put it up on a shelf and so forth, and just history just exploded. No, right? This is it. And so the truth embargo is up against a massive UFO flap in the age of influencer social media and the podcast revolution, and they are literally swarming it. Huge numbers of videos being put together and pushed out every single day. Then people doing, oh, by the way, the evolution of editing software, when even a 7-year-old can like create a movie as good as you could get in 1955. And so they're taking the stuff, editing it into montages, putting that out, right? Different countries, different states, pouring it out the door. The government is up against that. It hasn't got a chance in hell. The sooner it gives up and says, look, hey, let's hold a hearing, have the president come forward, confirm the non-human tech, probably from another star. That's where my money is. And then let's move on in the post-disclosure world. The sooner they do that, the better, because they cannot win this. They're going to be rolled over, right? And every day they're making a bigger fool of themselves. They're submitting bills to minimize or ban the ability of people to buy drones from China, and unable to say what the much bigger drones and other stuff and other things over our base, who they're from and why they're there. I mean, if a person acted that way, they would be taken and put in a nice place, a nice facility where they would be served regular meals and be able to play ping pong, but not be able to leave. That's where our government is right now. And so when I say the truth embargo is on its last legs, I mean it.
I don't think they're going to be able to keep trying to deceive the population much longer. That's right. I think that we're down to the final run here.
Yes, and more and more people are starting to come forward, various individuals, some of my colleagues, and saying this is it. This is it. All right. Now, let's get to the other side of the coin. Factoring in everything I just said, which is a lot, now let's look at the disclosure process in America. It's made tremendous strides in the last 7 years. It's had some setbacks. It's slowed down. There's been a lot of pretty weird things happening, unpleasant things, dangerous things, but it's moving along. It never goes backward now. It always moves forward. And so we've had 8 hearings roughly since 2022. Right? We'd only had 2 prior, and that was in 1966 and 68. All right. We've formed several organizations within the DOD to deal with the issue. Currently, the organization is ARROW, the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, a perfect name and a perfect acronym. I'll give them that. Quality work. All right. And so 8 hearings. All right. One of the hearings was a gangbuster. That was David Grush, a breakthrough. And he came out and confirmed, and it has not been unconfirmed, that we have non-human tech and non-human bodies, which confirms Roswell and confirms the extraterrestrial presence, which would be disclosure if David was the president of the United States. And he's not. Okay. But boy, did that create some heat and some heavy-duty stuff. That was 2023. After that, Chuck Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader, responds by putting forward a bill written by himself and Mike Rounds and his staff, a massive UAP Disclosure Act, which was it was the total bill. That was it. That's all we need. Put that bill in process, pass that bill, right? Get it signed by the president, and then immediately start the process in which everything the government has related to this phenomena, present, past, comes out, gets vetted, goes to the public domain, and eventually into the archives. A orderly process, some things held back, whatever, got some powers to inform it, essentially make sure it happens, and that's it. So the bill was in place. It's not really going to go anywhere until we get disclosure, but the bill was in place. That bill was cut in half, but then it was resubmitted again. All right. Now I can get into all the details, but I'm simply saying that since my world is here, I spend a lot of time, I work on both coasts, but essentially I know Washington pretty well, and I'm following it pretty closely. You have a UAP caucus in the House for the first time ever, the first caucus of that type ever. You've had 2 substantive public House subcommittee hearings, one chaired by Burchett, the other by Mace. Mace said she wants to have another one. One of the other members has let it be known he wants to have one. They're kind of competing to see who's going to chair the next hearing. And Mace, I believe, and this one other member of that committee has stated that they want the nuclear weapons witnesses to finally come forward, the shutdown witnesses, the Bob Salas, the Robert Jacobs, the tampering witness, as well as possibly Dave Schindel. And I played a very important role there. I'll take some credit for that. And so it's very likely the next hearing they're going to testify. That is bombshell stuff. I mean, when that testifies, it's going to set the world on fire. It's the testimony the government's been dreading ever seeing in front of a committee, ever. And they've done everything they can to ghost these men who have been trying to get in front of a committee for 30 years. The closest they ever came was when I was able to hold a citizen hearing on disclosure in Washington in May 29, June 5, 2013, and 42 witnesses from 10 nations testified for 30 hours. And these nuclear witnesses had about 2.5 hours to testify under a mock oath to a mock congressional panel made up of former members of Congress. It was conducted like a real hearing. Those 30 hours are out there. You can find them on YouTube, Citizen Hearing on Disclosure channel, right? There are also a lot of sets of these things and discs, 10 set discs floating around. I delivered a set of the entire hearing, disc set of every single member of Congress, all 545 back in 2014, and more since. So they're going to testify. That's almost certain. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is right up there with Hillary Clinton as being the presidential candidate, leading presidential candidate that has gotten more questions about this issue. About the same. They've both gotten about the same, a lot of questions. Now, her responses were more substantive than his, but his responses had meaning. And there's no question that a couple of them seem to indicate that he wants to get this out. Also, I know that some people around him are seeing the wisdom of that, and they're bringing it up. His son has brought it up. And, of course, Donald Trump is not any president. He's an unusual man. And he is a president unlike any other in the sense that he'll do whatever the hell he wants. Clinton was tasked to try to get the files out. Money was provided to do research to help him do that. He tried. The DOD basically just ghosted him. Go away. Leave us alone, Mr. President. You're nobody. And then they found out every thing they could about him and tried to impeach him. And they basically got him under control. That was then. Donald Trump is not Bill Clinton.
Now, Steve,
if he wants to disclose, he will.
Okay, Steve, we got a caller. Who do we have out there?
You got Art again.
Okay, well, Art, what's your question for Steve?
Yeah, there's some of us out here that have seen many different things, crafts, paranormal. We have it's almost like in our lives, we feel like there's some connections to these things as in why they present themselves in front of us and react. So my question would be, we are disclosure. With Gary's show, I just feel that we're getting out the disclosure. My friends are joining in to hear these things, and we share stuff. And I met people, like if it was by synchronicity accident, I met people that were involved in some of these top secret things. And why would I even have that kind of a run in with somebody and they share something with me? So it seems like my disclosure is coming out, but by by normalness of living and then just it happening in front of me. So my question would be, and again, some of these things seem to be angelical in a sense, like the ship is not with a human in it or an alien in it. that the ship is alive. They can transform into military craft or commercial craft. As I watch them do that, and some of them, the orbs, they have some sort of like liquid inside them. It didn't seem like a drone would have that capability, and the way they cloak, and so all these things that I have so many questions is there something there that they sense us, or they know us through some sort of understanding who we are with our minds? Because that's where I feel like that's where I'm at, and some others, we feel there's a connection with the thought more or less. I can say no words, just thought, that we feel there's a connection because the way they come out and show themselves, and how they allow to come close to us. And so just want to leave you with that question then. Are we having, some of us here on Earth, that ability to communicate with that kind of thought issue? And if you understand what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, he'll give you the answer. He'll give the answer online. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Art.
So there are three phrases and terms I want to put out there to help with some of the confusion. There is the small d disclosure process. Small d disclosure process. So that's a term. And that is a process in which information is revealed or found out and discovered by whatever means. Through journalism, through research, through meeting people, whatever. All of the efforts and all of the processes that have led to information coming out is the small d disclosure process. It's basically a discovery process. There's another term, the capital D disclosure process. Capital D disclosure refers to the confirmation event, the authority, the head of state confirmation event, where the nation's leader says, we're not alone. We have a non-human extraterrestrial presence. That's capital D disclosure. It's a term I came up way back about 2000. It is what we've been heading for. It is the goal of the movement. It is the door to the next world, the next paradigm. The capital D disclosure process is the political process to get the government to admit the presence of these ETs, and therefore disclosure takes place. And as I define it, it can only come from a head of state. A member of Congress doesn't count. A member of the Army doesn't count. Undersecretary of this or that doesn't count. And unless the president confirms it, it is not formal, and it will not have the effect that we need it to have. So you've got small d disclosure, the small d disclosure process. Okay, you've got the capital D disclosure process, and you've got disclosure. And so we know a lot about this phenomena. We know a lot about its history. We've learned a great deal from the contactees. We're not ignorant. We're not out in the woods wandering around. Okay, so we're able to make relatively reasonable assessments of what goes on, though we don't have certainty because the government obviously is still withholding so much. And so, are they angelic? Are they this? Are they pilot? Are they? It doesn't really matter. The point is, are they human or not human? Okay, and I'm not referring to birds. In other words, human or not human technology, right? So, meaning they're made by non-human intelligence, NHI, which is the comfortable term now for extraterrestrial. That's what matters. The details will come, hopefully, after disclosure, and relatively soon. But until then, no. We're not going to get those kinds of details, at least not in a way that's straightforward and we can depend on it. But there's a lot of the details that are now in play. They're just not confirmed. So disclosure leads to the confirmation of a lot we have learned, also the bringing out of a lot of things we didn't even know about, and more importantly, the eliminating of the things that aren't true that have accumulated during this truth embargo, the filling in of all the rabbit holes and so forth, so that people are less likely to waste their time bumbling around in the dark, grabbing at this and that, when in fact they're in the wrong room, right? Disclosure turns on the light, so we know where we are, we can figure out the truth, and we can move forward. It's a big deal. It's the most important event in human history, right? And so people should, I don't mind people speculating and trying to understand this. I just ask them, don't get too worked up about it, okay? Because we don't have the full picture yet. The government has withheld too much. We're going to get that eventually, and we're going to get it through this political process of disclosure. And right now, when you talk about these this flap going on, these light plasma type things that are turning up everywhere, it's notable that we're not seeing saucers, by and large. A couple of videos seem to be showing what could be a saucer. There's been a couple of cylinder things that have turned up in some videos, not sure. But overall, we're just not seeing saucers.
And you're right. Hey, now, we got another caller real quick here.
Okay.
Who do we have?
This is Tom.
Hi, Tom. How are you doing?
Pretty good. I'd like to ask your guest, one part of disclosure that has not been covered as much as, say, the UFO phenomenon is that of the Black Knight satellite. And I wanted to know if your guest had any comments on that, because that is definitely something that I think needs to be disclosed. I know that the government has been looking into this, and they've actually sent people to try to allegedly get into that satellite, which supposedly has been orbiting for the last 12,000 years around the Earth. And I just wanted to know what your guest, if anything, could say about that.
Good question.
I don't want to I'm sorry to disappoint you. I actually looked into it. Okay, the Black Knight is an artifact of the truth embargo. Right, nothing is ever resolved. Everything's left up in the air. The government would love us to just go round and round about this and that and everything else, as long as we're not in front of them asking hard questions. Right. I've actually looked into it. I've seen the photographs. The Black Knight is essentially, think of like a canvas. Think of a canvas, only much slicker material, right? It's essentially a radiation shield that has folded up and got off one of our either satellites or possibly one of the space stations. But I think it was a satellite, and floated off. And I've actually seen the image of this thing attached to it. And when you look at it, you can see, because we do have images of the Black Knight, you can see that, yeah, that's what it is. It's just some sort of radiation shield type shroud that just fell off, and it stays in the same shape because it's space, right? Sorry.
Well, that answers it. Now, we got 4 minutes left. What do you want to say to the listeners?
Look, you need to get ready for disclosure. And to the extent you can, try to start supporting the organizations that are forming to deal with the post-disclosure world and get disclosure, wrap it up. Probably leading that is the New Paradigm Institute, which is now growing very fast, very substantial organization. Check it out, newparadigminstitute.org. They're doing a lot of citizen work, citizen petitions, things like that. They're making it possible to contact your Congress, but it's high level. They have some funding. They need millions more, and I think they'll get it. All right? And then be aware that there is a science think tank called the Soul Foundation, created by Gary Nolan. Check out the Soul Foundation. They're literally preparing for the post-disclosure world. And you've got the UAP fund, the UAP disclosure fund, UAP fund. And it is a 5014 political nonprofit to raise funds to be able to address the political issues of the post-disclosure world. I recently co-founded with Dan Harari the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance. It's 1 year old. Check out HollywoodDisclosureAlliance.org. This is a nonprofit service entity designed to network people together to create the content, correct content, that is going to be needed by the world leading into disclosure and afterwards. And the way it works is by networking people in the Hollywood film industry with the people in the UAP world, the citizens carrying all the water, and make sure they can get together, find each other, and create content that gets the message right. And then, of course, there's ParadigmResearchGroup.org. I am a nonprofit now. I'm a 501c3. Get a tax donation. As soon as I raise $25,000, the first project I'm going to do as a 501c3 is launch the 7th X Conference. The last one was in 2010. It will be held at the National Press Club. It will be in Washington, D.C., and it will be pretty cool. But I have to have about $25,000 to launch it because I have to secure the space at the National Press Building. So the Paradigm Research Group is changing into a think tank. The website's under revision. It's a little rocky right now, but it's improving every day. And so there's that. And there are other organizations that you can get involved with. But we're practically there, folks. This is probably it. I'm pinning it within 60 days of the inauguration. Right, that would put it out at March 20. So let's see what happens. If that's true, this is going to be quite the year.
Oh, yeah, it could be. That or we're going to be invaded, too. You never know. Depends on who you listen to. It's getting really scary on there. If you go, like I said, on TikTok or YouTube, and a lot of these people, they have, false flag going, this going, that going.
I get that. That's truth embargo artifacts, false flag. And that's fine. I mean, they're a little worried about it. It hasn't happened. It's not going to, right? Let me tell you, people are excited. They're not panicking. Panicking was the people on the Titanic. They were panicking, all right? But people are not panicking to this issue. They're watching these videos and they're saying, oh, my God, and this and that and everything else. They're fine. We have been drowning in UAP, UFO, ET movies and docs and books and films for decades and decades. Not just we, pretty much the entire developed world and a significant portion of the, quote, not developed world. We've been drowning in it, right? This is not going to be a shock. It'll be a little bit of a shock. It'll take a little adjustment. But, hey, and if there's something awful there, so what? If there is something awful there, I don't think there is. But then we'll all face it together, all 8 billion of us. But the idea there's something awful there, but only a select few of the elitists who work inside some black project or have special access to information as a politician, or billionaires that get tipped off, those people are intellectually and emotionally incapable of dealing with this awful thing. The rest of us shouldn't be told because we're just little children. I don't care what it is. I don't care how bad it is. All 8 billion of us should face it together, and anybody that says otherwise needs to step aside. Their time is over. The truth embargo is going to end. We're going to enter the post-disclosure world.
And we need that. As long as they don't come down here and have a book that says "To Serve Man," then I'm going to be concerned.
And nobody's ever going to let me forget that one.
Okay, my friend. Well, thank you for coming on, and you have a great weekend that's coming up, will you, Steve?
I'm going to have a great weekend. Thank you, Gary.
Okay, you take care. Well, we will be back tomorrow. Again, we had a malfunction at the beginning of the show. I don't know what happened, but if it's going to happen, it's going to happen with me. I can tell you that. I'll be back tomorrow. Everybody check out our website. It's been updated at www.nightdreamstalkradio.com. Our head count on YouTube is now over 207,000. We're at about 1 million downloads per episode on the app. So check us out on your favorite app, Apple, iHeart, or whatever. On YouTube tonight, make sure you give us a thumbs up and leave a comment. Everybody have a good one. We will catch you on the other side. So stay looking at the sky.
Who's friends with all the night dreamers talking to you at night? Gary on the radio, but maybe he's not in sight. Bigfoot's on his tail, flying UFOs.